Today, we're joined by someone who brings a truly holistic perspective to health, Felicia Jones, a nutritionist, stress management trainer, and the founder of Stress Less Living. With over 15 years' experience in both public and private health, Felicia has supported countless people on their journey to better well-being. She's also a supervisor for nutritional therapists and a familiar voice to many as a regular guest on Mental Health Matters 360 broadcast. What makes Felicia's work so special is the way she seamlessly blends nutrition with stress management. She offers a practical, down to earth tools that make a real difference in everyday life. Through her workshops like Writing for Wellbeing, Well Women, and Let's Talk Health, as well as one to one services such as meal planning and nutrient reviews, Felicia empowers people to take charge of their health in simple yet powerful ways. We'll be exploring her journey into her work and why she connects food and certain principles together and her top tips for living well. Felicia, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to our podcast.
Oh, thanks, Sam. It's really great to be here with you.
So, I've got a couple of questions. So, how did you um, sort of get going in this kind of work?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was thinking the other day about, my journey, and it hasn't been all straightforward. It's been, running a business up and down and kind of all over the place. But when I think about it, in some ways, it feels as if certain components were meant to be. And I know that different practitioners that I've spoken to or I'm aware of, they go through a health issue and then they start to have a practice that's kind of based on that issue. And that's a tiny bit of my story, but really where it starts when I'm thinking about the nutrition side, as far as I can think, as far back as I can think, I've always loved food and loved cooking and being around people who love eating. And that's partly because my grandma was a huge influence on me. And she was in Barbados, and I used to go and visit and stay with her. And she had at the back of her house, she had a big plot of land that I call a small holding. It's probably not as big as I imagined, but when I was a kid, it felt as if it was the world. And there were lots of trees with fruit, and she had loads of plants and lots of herbs, and she even had a goat. She kept chickens and rabbits, and she had all of this, and she was an amazing cook. So that was one thing. But she also taught me the value of food and sort of understanding, what a seed is and how that grows into a plant. So it's hard work cultivating that. So what
Mm.
the value of that is. But she also taught me about really what I think of as the language of love, because she would feed anybody at her table. So that really opened up that side of nutrition to me. And then there were other people in my life who cooked a lot, so I learned from them. But as I got older, I got more curious. And I don't know about you growing up, but like for me, I was very much into getting out there and trying things. And one of the things that I did was I was running, and I was doing it for health and for fitness. But I was really intrigued to know, could nutrition do anything for me? Could it actually help with my performance? So I started experimenting with food and trying different things. And then from that, people were talking to me about what I was doing. And so the love of nutrition really grew from there. The stress management is slightly different because um, when I think back to how that started, I was in London in my 20s working and really enjoying the experience. And I was hearing a lot about people in the financial services and in the city who were coming down with this flu. And all of a sudden, they were fine. Nothing was wrong with them. They were working hard. All of a sudden, they'd come down with this flu. And there were all these jokes about, men having man flu and being weak and not being able to really deal with it. But then what they weren't saying that I was actually reading in other articles or hearing about was that the stress that people were under was so endemic that they were actually having breakdowns and they were burning out. And I was really intrigued, like, how can stress do that to the body? How can it make things, collapse like that? And so I was really interested, and I kept on kind of dipping in and out of stress, understanding about stress. And then when I decided to go to go to study nutrition, I thought, you know what, I really want to know more about nutrition and the body, but I'm also really interested in stress. So I'm going to look at both of those elements. And I was doing my degree, it was fine. And then 6 weeks, about, yeah, 6 or 7 weeks before I finished, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So it was obviously, it was a shock, a really horrendous time. And getting through that period was really tough. But I got through it. And then I seemed to be getting better. I was getting stronger. And then the opposite happened. My body just stopped working. It just felt as if it was collapsing in on me. And I had chronic fatigue syndrome. And so I was left with, I would get these lightning like headaches, and I couldn't focus. My eyes hurt, everything hurt. My eyes hurt. My mouth was always dry. My digestion wasn't working. I couldn't talk sometimes because I'd go to say a word, I couldn't find it. My brain wasn't connecting with different parts of my body. So I went. I was like, I could see it, but it wouldn't come out. I couldn't have a bath because if I got in the bath, I couldn't get out. So
Oh,
during that time, it became a real practical stress management training for me, because it was like, what's going on? How can I, learn about how to get better? And sometimes I couldn't do anything, because people think chronic fatigue syndrome means that you're just tired all the time, but it's not like that. There's just so many other things going on. So when I was able to listen to something, or even, just watch something, I'd learn as much as I could, and I learned more about relaxation. I learned a lot about how the brain operates, the autonomic nervous system, the parasympathetic, and just the range of issues that are caused by people having stress. And then, slowly I applied things and I got better. But, I was also recognizing other people that were going through this. And then when I got better, and then I started working with people, what they were going through. And it was the cost. It was this huge cost that you go through that, as I said, I couldn't talk and I couldn't walk, so I couldn't work. So I didn't have an income. I lost so much confidence because I wasn't able to socialize or interact with people. And so it became a real passion, whereas before it'd been an interest, you know,
mm,
kind of a theoretical. And it's like that, why I said at the beginning, it feels as if certain things were meant to be. I mean, it was horrendous. I'd never wish it on anybody, but it really opened up an understanding for me. So that's not a nutshell, but in a nutshell, that's how I got to this part of my life, and working in this.
oh, thank you very much for like sharing your journey. It's really interesting, and I love the story about your childhood. It sounds amazing, and I think you spot on with stress, just where we are, just where humanity is. Just stress seems to be part of our lives, which is quite sad, but
Yeah.
very, very real. So as a nutritionist and stress management trainer, what do you do exactly?
What do I do? I do quite a lot of different things. It's not only working with people, as you know, I write, I do podcasts like this, I do talks. But one of the things that I really love is the group work I do. And you touched on that at the beginning, because it's partly educational, but it's also giving people practical applications. That's so important for me.
Mm.
You go to these workshops and you think, oh, that's really great, and you leave and you're like, I didn't really take anything away. So I really like tangible things. So the primary ones I do is I do the writing for well-being. And that's very much kind of on those stress management principles, and enabling people to be able to take all of that stuff that's going on in their heads out of that and put it on a page. Is that, enabling people to sometimes reflect on what's going on in their lives and where they'd like to go forward, and just giving permission for people to be able to be in that space where they can be honest with themselves. They don't have to share their work, they don't have to read it out if they don't feel comfortable, but it's allowing, it's kind of creating that space. And then Well Woman is very much, it's for women. Writing for Wellbeing isn't My other program isn't, but Well Women is for women, and it's very much about developing resilience and really tuning into who you want to be as a woman. And it doesn't mean to, you're going to be out there fighting and doing all of that rah rah. It could be that you're a quiet person, you want to bring that into yourself. And so we generally start with some kind of sensory experience. So it could be smelling something, touching something, doing a meditation, just simply so people tune into themselves, give themselves that space. And then, and it sounds a funny thing, but we give ourselves permission to play. So, as you get older, you don't play, do you? It's like, yes, you might, I don't know, go to the park with your kids and stuff, but just to actually have that time to experiment and to just really try different things out. And if it doesn't work, it's fine. It's not the end of the world. You're not a failure. So we might do some writing, some poetry reading. We might do an activity, or even like the last one we just did, we did some colouring as well, and did some mind mapping and almost like a mood board. And it was that allowing again that permission. So that's the Well Women. And then the third one, Let's Talk Health, that's very much more about an educational. So people come, they don't have to have a health issue. It could be a lot of people just want to work on their health as they're getting older. And so they don't have a certain condition, but some people do. They come because they've got a certain condition, and it's an educational for me. So there's part educational, and then people get to ask questions, to do a little bit of group work. And one of the main things for me with that is there's no silly questions. And again, I know I keep talking about permission, but allowing people to ask things that they're uncertain of, because there's all these myths and things that you should do with your diet and all these things that aren't true, and people get caught up and get afraid to be
Mm.
able to ask those questions. And some people even think they've got to be an expert before, and it's like, it's not that. Come, show up. And if you've got questions, then we can work through them. We can answer them. I might not be able to answer them all there and then, but if it's in my field, then I'll try and do the best. So they're primarily the three group programs, and then I do some one-on-ones around, like you said, meal planning and helping people find the right nutrients for their body. So a real variety of things.
I think those all sound amazing. And I also like how you bring the whole mindfulness, like the coloring and things like that, and sort of having that time to play and have some me time. I think it's just really, really amazing. So they sound really interesting. So why do you connect both nutritional and stress management principles rather just focusing on the one?
That's really interesting, because in a way it seems really complicated, but in another way it's really simple. Like, if you think of us, where we've got biochemistry, we've got that mental element, we've got the emotional element, and all of those come together, and they're always really, operating on some kind of level. So I love what food can do for the body, what it can do for your organs, what it can do for your tissues. But if you're stressed, then you're releasing stress chemicals, which are going against all of the good things that the food's doing. So it could be that changes your hormones or the receptors in your body and the signaling. So you've got these two or three kind of dualities going on, and I feel that all of those need to be addressed. I mean, I think of just as an example, like, we're here talking, you're talking to me, you're looking at me, hopefully you're alert, so your brain is going, and you're sitting in your chair, so you're upright and all of your muscles are really kind of fixed, and you might not think about it, but your body needs nutrients for all of that. And so that's on kind of the biochemical level. But then say we're talking and I just say something and you're like, that was a bit harsh. I didn't really like the way that you talked to me, and you weren't expecting it. Then you might have an emotional reaction to that that releases those chemicals. And so, that's why I think it's really important for us to consider all of that, not only, the nutritional side of it, but also the stress management, because we want to be in a situation where we can get into that parasympathetic, that rest and digest. Not all the time. And I think people are really fearful sometimes that if I'm relaxed all the time, I'm not going to be able to function. But if you think about it, like if you've got a presentation or if you've got to perform, you perform better when you're actually relaxed and you're inside yourself. So I think, it's really important for us to be able to get into that parasympathetic state whenever we actually need it, and to use the nutrients to help every single cell in our body that needs it to thrive. So yeah, for me, both of those things go hand in hand, really.
Well, that makes sense to me. I think you spot on. I mean, everything is connected. So that definitely shines a light on how important it is for the two things to be combined when dealing with nutrition and stress and all those things. So can you give me an example of how your work has helped other people?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll think about somebody right at the end, but when I think about I love working with people on a one to one because you get that immediate, but when I think of the most powerful, it is group, and that's why I do a lot of group work now,
Mm.
because it's the collective of that group working together. And particularly when I do things online, I have people say, "Well, I can't turn the camera on, I've got anxiety, I'm really shy, I can't do that." And then you recognize, if it's a safe space, within a few weeks, they've got the camera on and they're fine. They might not say anything. And then weeks after, they're talking and they're interacting. And I love as well when I'm doing something around nutrition and people quite tentative, but then they come back and they tell me and tell the group what they've actually done, and they're recommending things to each other. And it feels like if I'm almost like a conduit. So I'm there giving the information, but they're able to do what they need to do with it. And so that gives me the greatest joy, because we're all so capable of things. We often just need somebody to direct us in the right place. So that's what I feel, that job is. But and I've got so many examples. I was thinking, particularly because I was doing a bit of work around something about this guy that was in one of my weight management groups, and we talked about social situations, and we talked about sleep hygiene, and different things that you could do to help you with your sleep. And he took that on board, but he also went home and he was talking to his wife, and he still wasn't sleeping. And she said, "Why don't you try these herbal teas?" Well, I'd mentioned that, but he was like, "No, I'm not trying herbal teas. That's a load of rubbish," and all that sort of thing. But his weight was in such a state because he wasn't able to sleep. He was just grabbing, eating anything, then he was falling asleep in the evening and then eating late, and it was just a whole mess for him. So in desperation, he was like, "I tried these herbal teas," and he came back. It wasn't the first week, probably I think about the third or fourth week afterwards, just raving about it and telling everybody just how much it had revolutionized his life, because he was able to sleep. He was able to actually turn off and be more relaxed. And so that meant that he woke up in the morning in a relaxed state. He was able to make himself breakfast, get through the day. His body wasn't all over the place, and before he went to sleep, he wasn't anxious that he wasn't going to be able to sleep. And that was from like one thing. So I know, people often take medications to sleep, and I'm not against medication at all if that's what you need to do. Very much, do that. But I think there's a lot of other things that we can do to, as I said, about the herbal teas. We can find different ways to relax. We can look at what we're eating. Some people even need to eat something in the evening because they're trying to, especially I find there's a lot of people that are trying to lose weight. They stop eating and in the evening our body's still working and it needs nutrients, still in the bloodstream. So having something to eat, or even having some air, fresh air, and having, darkened curtains. I wear an eye patch. All of those things can help us. And I know people often say, "I've tried everything," but just thinking, well, can I give it another go and just try and do one thing to relax? Because I've had countless stories of people that have just tried one thing and that's made a huge difference. So yeah.
I think you're absolutely spot on. Like a few things that you mentioned, I think the safe space is super important. And I can understand how that helps and gets people sort of chatting and feeling like having a trust with each other and everything. So I think that's amazing. And also the herbal teas, I'm a fan. I have my chamomile before bed every night. I have a variety of different herbal teas in my cupboard. So this morning I've had green tea. I'll probably have a peppermint tea later and
Yeah.
a ginger and lemon tea. And then my my go-to chamomile to help me sleep at night. But
Good.
I definitely think it's helped. There was a long period of time where I was sort of having a lot of coffee and tea, which is they're both quite high in caffeine. I mean, you can get the decaf range, but by swapping to the herbal teas, it's definitely helped me. So
Mm,
I totally agree with what you're saying with all that.
good.
Um, so what are your top three tips for staying healthy and well?
Well, of course, I'd be saying eating well you as a nutritionist, but I think that it is really important because we don't realize it's right down to the cellular level. So
Mm,
every single thing in our body needs nutrients. Even, I'm just sitting here feeling my feet on the carpet. My toes actually will need those nutrients. So that's really important. And alongside that, with water, with keeping our cells hydrated, every single cell hydrated, our brain hydrated, so we've got great cognition. And when we've got a body which is well hydrated, it means that all of the nutrients could go through the bloodstream and get to where they need to be. It's not, they're not all clogged. So definitely, I think that nutrition is really important. And as I said before, if you want to make a change, doing one thing, so if you're not having breakfast, instead of thinking to yourself, oh, I need to have all these special shakes and all of this kind of thing, it's simply thinking, no, I'm going to make a breakfast that I can have a little bit of and have on the go. So some overnight oats, if that's what you want, or some yogurt and some fruit, or maybe a smoothie. Make it as simple as possible, and then,
mm,
once you've done that one thing, maybe you move on to another. But I will say to people, do it for at least 6 weeks or 8 weeks, because often when we're trying to change our eating behaviors, I see people go, oh, right, I'm throwing everything out of the cupboard. They say, have this superfood. I'm going to eat that. I'm going to eat that. And it's really not necessary to do that. The second thing I'd say was sleep, as I
mm,
mentioned, because um, we need to be able to rest. Even when we're asleep, we're not dead, but our body is actually processing a lot of things. So, all those thoughts, all those emotions, all those things that happen in our neurotransmission, all of the food that we've taken on in the day that might have had something and created toxic matter in our body that needs to be flushed out, and, just cleaning and cleansing our body for the next day. So it's so important that we do that. And then all of our muscles, to be able to let our muscles actually relax so that we're not tense when we wake up in the morning. So sleep is such an important thing. We don't even know all of the reasons that we sleep and all of the benefits for it. But I think on a internal level, we all know if you've had a good night's sleep, how that feels. Because again, when I had chronic fatigue, it's a strange thing, and I really say this for anybody who doesn't understand it or kind of says, oh, it's nothing. There were times when I wasn't sleeping, and it's no word of a lie, for like 17 or 24 hours. My body just could not shut off. So getting that rest is so important. So that's the second thing. And then the third thing I'd say is community, and having a really good support system. And it doesn't even need to be people that you meet online, that you meet in person. It could be online. Like, there's a group that you sent me a message to that I'm now part of, and it's really positive. And having that and finding what works with you, because it could be that you're a really gregarious person and you want to be around people, finding that, or you could be quieter and find that too much noise is not great for you. So finding yeah, your community, your tribe, and particularly people who will advocate for you and who will spur you on. And when we're talking about health, particularly people are going to say, yeah, you've done really well, you've walked 10 minutes, keep on going. Not, no, you walked 10 minutes, I walked 5 miles, that kind of thing. Really, people that encourage you. I think that's so important. We know from research about oxytocin and connection and all of those feel good chemicals. So yeah, connecting with the right people and having community, I think that's really important too.
Oh, I love all of your tips. They're really, really spot on. Um, and I think often people do forget how important like sleep is. I think people just are like, oh yeah, it's just one of those things that we have to do. But I think it is really important. And definitely now that I'm a well, that I'm a mom, I think before I was a mom, I didn't realize how important sleep was. And then you have children, and then you're like, jeepers, sleep is really important. And then whether or not your children sleep, you're like, wowzers, sleep is super
Yeah.
important, because you can just see if someone's had a good night's sleep or not. So thank you for those tips. It's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and practical tips with us today. It's been really inspiring to hear about how combining the nutrition and the stress management can create such powerful results, um, to your health and well-being. And if you'd like to learn more about Felicia's amazing work and her workshops and her one-to-one support, you can have a look at her website, which is stresslessliving.co.uk. And as always, thank you for tuning into the Health and Wellbeing podcast. And until next time, take care of yourself and keep choosing little steps to a healthier, happier life.
Oh, I love
Bye.
it. Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.